run into
Yours,
one of
yours will be missing tonight.
It's just shrinking.
Some of them is hard to move them. It's on the other side, it should be.
There we go.
I'm ready to adjust the chairs tonight.
She never responded, so.
Yeah, it's gotta be my turn to behave here, Don.
I swear I just did.
Becky.
Sometimes it's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is like a hazing thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's random, but Toby, you're 2 out of 3.
I better tell
Figured it
Lisa
out.
we need to move Toby around next time.
Hey,
so
Lisa,
he feels alone.
move Toby next
Toby
time.
can't sit on the end next time.
No?
But she's
Feeling a little isolated over
He has
there.
a,
Pretty soon, I'll be sitting out there.
he has a complex.
Go.
I just randomly
Whoa,
put
look at
things.
that. That's serious.
That's like
Random?
digital
do.
technology.
This was random?
Intentionally random.
Oh,
She puts you on
right.
the end.
I'm always here random.
Well, she just took them out in the order in which she had them.
Yeah. You're up.
Good evening, and welcome to the Muscatine Community School District Board of Education meeting for Monday, April 9th. Madam Secretary, would you take roll for us and determine a quorum?
You bet. Director Bauer,
Here?
DeBeat,
Here.
Drawbaugh,
Here?
Finn, Mather,
Here.
McCarter,
Here.
Wildermuth.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. If you would stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome all of our visitors that we have in the audience this evening, and including our media representatives as well. We appreciate your time in spending the evening with us. The first thing on our agenda is to have a public hearing. This is for the purpose of certifying our 2018 and 19 school budget. I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to open the public hearing. Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote for us?
Director Bauer,
Aye.
DeBeat,
Aye.
Drawbaugh,
Aye.
Mather,
Aye.
McCarter,
All right.
Wildermuth.
Aye.
All ayes.
Thank you. Tom, I will look to you, or Jerry, if you have anything from a discussion perspective that we need to be aware of on the budget.
I have a presentation during the action item
Okay.
portion, but no other discussion.
Okay. And did you receive any written or oral comments?
None.
Okay. So the purpose of the, to have the public hearing is to give anyone in the audience an opportunity that would like to address the board regarding the hearing. This is not the approval of the hearing. There were no other comments. I would then, and unless any board member specifically has anything right now, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded. Madam Secretary, could you do another roll call vote for us?
You bet. Director Bauer,
Aye.
DeBeat,
Aye.
Drawbaugh,
Aye.
Mather,
Aye.
Carter,
All right.
Wildermuth.
Aye.
All ayes.
Thank you. And the public hearing is closed. Next on our agenda is our student council report. They're going to do rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first back there.
Hi again, so my name is Saul Campo. I've been here a few times. Once again, I'm a senior at Muscatine High School, and I'm the vice president of our student council. And here we have Brooke Horton, a freshman member, and it is her first time presenting at these meetings, so kind of give her some leeway, I guess, if you do that.
So prom is coming up really quickly. It is on Saturday, April 21st at the Merrill Hotel, which is down here, downtown. And it's from 8 to 11. Next year's student council applications have been distributed to the middle schools and the eighth graders at the middle schools and to everyone in the high school. We plan on sending senior members to the middle schools to advise this week. Packets and application materials will be due on April 18th. And class selections for next year will be at our meeting on May 17th. And then we will be hosting a staff appreciation lunch on Friday, May 11th.
And also on that day, May 11th, we have a middle school dance. We have it every year. It's kind of a quick fundraiser, and it also introduces a middle school to the middle schoolers to kind of the high school and how we run things there. And the last thing we have, May 18th, is going to be our last high school dance, and this is one hosted by the lower classmen. And both semesters we had, our first semester we had the upperclassmen do a charity event, a charity project, and that was our Happiness Week, which we had kind of a stress relief week for our finals. And this semester it is on the lower classmen to have a charity event, and they have decided to host that dance on May 18th. And all the proceeds from that dance will benefit the local humane shelter, or the Humane Society, the animal shelter. And that's all we have, so thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for them before they sneak away? Brooke, you did a great job on your first time. We hope you'll be back again. You have a pretty active audience up here, so I would be willing to bet that if you're still looking for chaperones for prom, you might have a couple people up here that might be willing. So hit them up for that.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, the person closest on the end, especially.
That's the reason you're sitting there, Toby.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your updates. Mike, I think I'm going to pass it to you. I believe you have some introductions with the mock trial team that's here to visit us.
Thanks, Tammy. It's really my privilege to introduce our mock trial teams. But before we do that, I'd like to invite Mike to come up to the podium here. And we have a lot to brag about with our mock trial teams. But we have a lot to brag about with Mike as well. So I wanted to take kind of an opportunity to talk a little bit about Mike. Mike was honored at the mock trial event, the state mock trial event, and inducted into the Iowa Mock Trial Hall of Fame. And one of the things, I've had an opportunity to work with Mike many years, and always have had enjoyed it, learned a lot, but his passion, his dedication is, you know, I've never worked with somebody more passionate about what they do. Mike would always call or text, and he would say, you know, I've got an idea for something, you know, unfair extrapolation or exception to a hearsay rule or something. And the one I always liked, he's usually 5 in the morning where he'll text and he'll say, I think I have an ulterior motive to the facts of the case. And I'd always have to tell him, I don't think the facts warrant an ulterior motive. I think we have to go with the one, you know. But that's just how passionate Mike is. And he puts his heart and soul into mock trial. And he's done it for probably, Mike, what is it, almost 30 years?
Well, we really started to get serious about 14 years ago.
Okay. Okay.
And in 2000 is when we started to think about doing it.
Okay.
But I owe a big debt of gratitude to Mike as well. He acts as our judge when we go to tournaments. And one time in Waterloo, he had to drive through ice and rain to get there to be our judge. It's awfully hard. And then at the last moment, I called him to go to Des Moines and be our judge there too. But he's right. I bounce a lot of questions off of him. I'm not an attorney. And I always say I'm just a teacher, and I have to compete against other attorneys, trial attorneys. And I always feel like I'm at such a disadvantage. And to have another attorney to help me, to give me at least an idea of what's right, really makes me feel more comfortable. So.
And, and I was just going to say, Mike, to put it in perspective, very few people get elected into the Iowa Hall of Fame as a coach, and you're voted in by your peers. And I felt like at this time it might be, on behalf of the board and on behalf of our superintendent, we would like to congratulate you and give you a nice round of applause, Mike.
I've got to say, it wasn't just me, though. I had a lot of good people working for me and working with me, and I brought a few of them here with me today. And if I could introduce them, we'd move this along. First of all, you've met Saul Ocampo, Megan Custis, and Wyatt Mason. You'll find that nothing gets me more excited than mock trial, and I just start really getting passionate about it. But, you know, we'd work on Saturdays, over spring break, on Sundays, and, you know, a lot of these will tell you that I will email them at 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'll say, I want you to add the fact that they never saw you, and then it goes from there. Mr. McGroy has asked us to just do a quick presentation kind of what we do. This year was a murder trial, and we had a relative move back home, and he was short on cash, and so the theory was that he could kill his Aunt May and maybe stand to inherit a lot of money. And it was a very complex case because there were 3 things we had to prove. We had to prove a robbery, a murder, and an arson. And of course, it's nearly impossible to prove arson. And nobody really could prove the murder either. And so it was just really challenging for us. I would think just on one person's role, we spent about 100 hours just on their closing. And we get the case right before Christmas, and then, you know, we start madly after that. I can't even count the hours we put into it. And a lot of them are fruitless because you're chasing a skinny rabbit most of the time. And then finally we come up on the answer. And so anyway, Saul was honorable mention all-state attorney this year. And he was our closer. And we were in a grudge match against a team that had beat us before. And Nathan, you might remember when I called you that day right after that round and just said we really had a match. Well, they won that one, but we won this one. And I believe Saul drove it home with a little bit of his close. And if you are up to it, Saul, I'll give you a minute to just maybe give them a taste of some of the rhetoric we have to learn, some of the theatrical stuff we have to learn. We have to know the law. We have to be able to apply it. And we have to be able to change our theory in a moment's time based on what the other team does. And then, here you go, you got me going again. But I still say there's nothing more better learning experience than mock trial for all of the thinking skills that you have to know. So, Lowell, I'm going to ask you if you are ready to give part of your closing argument.
I guess I am. And so real quick before I begin, the closing argument is that last argument in the entire trial. It kind of ties all the evidence together that were presented by our side. In this case, I was the defense. I was defending the alleged murderer. And so really it is, we get about an 8-minute time limit, and we have to kind of condense our entire trial in those 8 minutes. So it is a bit challenging. And what I do specifically is I don't actually memorize it, but throughout the trial I kind of take notes and I get an idea of what to present to the judges once I'm ready. So really it's very dynamic, I think of it, but the first section, which I'll present right now, it is one that is memorized to an extent. It kind of reviews the overall ideas of the trial and perspective of the defense and the perspective of the prosecution and why we're right. So as we begin, when we're in trial, I say, may it please the court, and so here I go. May it please the court, opposing counsel, Your Honor, the evidence just is not enough. Today, you have been presented by the prosecution that the defendant, Devin Emerson, committed arson in the 2nd degree, murder in the 1st degree, and robbery in the 1st degree. But Your Honor, the defense has shown you with our trial that the evidence just does not add up. It just isn't enough. You've heard a lot today about the murder of the deceased, Lois May Alcott Walden, a pillar of her community. But let me tell you a little bit about the defendant, Devin Emerson. Devin was born in Arkansas, hundreds of miles away from any nearby relatives. Her mother died when she was very young, and her father blamed her for the death. Little did Devin know that all of these events that were happening in her life were beginning to add up to someone that the prosecution could blame for their crime. When Devin was about 15 years old, she moved back to Brookfield, Iowa, where the crime was committed on October 15, 2017. At Brookfield, Iowa, her father quickly left her after they arrived, once again blaming her for her mother's death. And so Devin Emerson had to be taken in by the nearest relative, her Aunt May. Your Honors, we have heard today from both sides, but let me tell you once again, the evidence just does not add up. The prosecution has presented 3 separate cases today. A case of arson in the 2nd degree, murder in the 1st, and robbery in the 1st. And Your Honor, for each of these cases, there is a burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Not more likely than not, but beyond a reasonable doubt. The highest level of burden of proof that is in our courts. So let me put it a little bit more into perspective for you. Think of the burden of proof as a pile of dirt, with each case of robbery in the 1st degree, arson in the 2nd degree, murder in the 1st degree, the pile of dirt just keeps getting higher and higher to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And Your Honor, the prosecutor has presented many witnesses today to try to sway you, but here is why we are right. And that's basically it. I mean, it was
Wow.
We appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight, and especially the opportunity to have this team. It's definitely one of the highlights of my life. If there are any questions for any of us, we'll entertain them. Otherwise, I know that your time is scarce and we must move on.
Are any of you guys thinking of going to law school?
I'm starting in English, so we'll see if I go law route.
So I was philosophy, which is far less useful than English. I personally have no idea what I'm going to do, so it is an option.
Looks got medicine, so totally the other way, but still.
Nice.
Definitely helps.
Very cool.
One thing I want to add too is that, Mike, this team this year finished the highest of any team we've ever had in our history of mock trial competition. And so I want to commend you and congratulate you for that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We finished 11th, and I thought we had it all in the palm of our hands going into the finals, but it's just so hard to be at the top level 2 rounds in a row, and we just ran across a better team the next round. With that, thank you again, and we'll be talking to you later.
All right, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, passion and dedication.
All right. Are you ready to do April employee recognition?
I am. Are you ready as
Perfect,
well?
I am.
All right. This evening, I'd like to share with you 5 individual people that we would like to highlight. Our first one is Kathy Dagner. So Kathy, if you could come up. Kathy is an at-risk teacher at Muscatine High School, and her nomination reads like this. I think she works hard, and not only for the money, but because she loves teaching and loves being able to help out when she can. Whenever someone needs something or you need someone to talk to, you can always count on her to save the day. Whenever a student is down or having a bad day, she always finds a way to make them better. Thank you for what you do every day. Emily Schroeder. Emily is a 2nd grade teacher at McKinley Elementary. Emily is very organized. She stays calm and collected. She treats all kids the same and is very good at making sure things are being taught that best fits their learning ability. When a student asks for help, she gives them the amount of time that they need until they completely understand. She always has a smile on her face and is a great person to go to if you need help or need to understand something. Lorinda Toberg. Lorinda is a special education para at Mulberry Elementary. Lorinda, or Mrs. T, as the staff and students call her, is a valued employee who steps up whenever the need arises. Her job title is Special Education Paraeducator, but the emphasis should be on special because she is truly one of a kind. She cares about all students and staff and goes above and beyond every single day. Mulberry is very lucky that she is a part of our team. This evening, Tasha Cantrell was unable to be here, and Tasha is an ESL teacher at Grant Elementary, and we'd like to share with you what her nomination says. Tasha is an amazing teacher in person. She goes above and beyond to help others, and she makes sure that her students are successful, whether it's collaborating with teachers, rearranging her schedule to meet student needs, or covering for others when they are in a pinch. Tasha does it all. She never hesitates to offer a listening ear and a friendly smile. Her positive attitude is an invaluable asset to Grant. And our other employee is Stacy Emmerich, and Stacy is an instructional coach at Madison Elementary. I would like to nominate Stacy for her outstanding contributions to our building. She fills many shoes here at our building: teacher, mentor, coach, administrator, secretary, lunch helper, and student advocate. She is readily available and has an open door policy. Our staff and students can go to her at any time to seek out research-based advice or just a really great piece of wisdom, even when she is hanging up awesome bulletin boards. Her sense of humor and involvement in community-based activities makes her our friend. Her dedication and commitment to our building's success isn't just because she loves data, it's because she loves us all. Thank you, Ms. Emmerich. So thank you for the board for recognizing these individuals tonight.
Excuse me. That's all right.
All right, the next portion of our agenda is our Citizen Speaks portion. This is where anyone that would like to address the board is welcome to do so. We would ask that you step to the podium, state your first and last name and your address so that our board secretary can gather that information. And then we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And as per board policy, we are not able to respond to those comments, but would love to hear if there's something you would like to share. And it's all quiet in the audience. All right, so no Citizen Speaks tonight. The next part of our agenda moves us to our board targets and our board goals. And coming off of recognizing staff, hearing some great things that our students are doing in the community or through the school district is a great way to start us off and to then talk about what our targets are and the things that bring us here together at the table. And Jerry, you look like you are ready to go.
I am ready to go. This is a conversation that earlier this afternoon we had with all of our elementary staff. Last week we had the conversation with our elementary principals and our secondary principals. And tonight we wanted to have that conversation with the board and with the greater public that is watching tonight. The first thing I want to say, when you think about enrollment, immediately, you immediately go to that has an effect on resources and money that the state's going to provide and all those kind of things. And what we're going to talk about tonight is some enrollment projections that we have for our district. But before we start looking at those, the one thing that I want to really make a strong case for is that we are not in crisis. We have declining enrollment, but that doesn't mean that we're in jeopardy. We're financially solvent, we're financially stable, we're in a place where we can make decisions. You get into trouble if you don't plan far enough out front so that you don't have to make decisions in crisis. And so what we want to talk about tonight is where our projections and some other pressures, as building ages, our facilities, what we may need to keep in mind for the short term, the mid-term, the long term for planning. And the principals came tonight. If the board has any questions for them about how this may affect their buildings or what that may look like in their buildings, and as we have been trying to talk about some of those short-term situations. So as the board is well aware, we have a number of buildings that are getting a little bit older, kind of like myself, getting older and maybe a little bit creaky sometimes. I said creaky and not cranky. We also provided when the dates when there were some additions made to those buildings. But as you can see, we have a number of buildings in that close to 60 or over 60 range. Public buildings, as we said, have a life expectancy of somewhere between 50 and 75 years. You know, and sometimes you'll hear, well, you know, there's office buildings in Washington, D.C. that are several hundred years old, and that is true. Office buildings don't tend to change much, or the use of them doesn't seem to change much. Schools change a lot. And if you look at the buildings that were built in 1954 or 1960 or 1938, the way they were constructed for the way schools were designed then, and not necessarily the way they'll need to be in 2025. So we have that issue that we have to keep in mind, that we've had a 10-year facility plan. We're halfway through that. That facility plan was how do we maintain these buildings and make sure we stay on top of those. What we have to start looking at now is after that 10 years, what are we going to do with those facilities? So that's one pressure that we have. Then the other with enrollment comes back down to, well, where do enrollments come from? They come from the number of kids that are born in our area. As you can see, from the high of 653, that our last figure that we have is down to 524 births. We've averaged about 60% of those will wind up being in Muscatine, or had been in the past. But this is a trend that is not uncommon to Muscatine. The state of Iowa is aging. There are only a handful of counties that are showing substantial growth. And unfortunately, with the number of births we have in Muscatine County, we don't have as many young kids entering our system. So what does that mean? Whoops. I'm really hoping I can go back. There we go. So our certified enrollment history and projections, and as we look at district-wide, and looking at the 2012-13 school year, we had 5,200 and almost 5,300 students. There's been a steady progression down in total enrollment. And as you see that purple line, that is the state projection for Muscatine for the 21-22 school year. The state has a fairly sophisticated system for making these predictions. They're about 98% right. And so they take into account a little bit more than just births, but they have other factors that go into that. So as we're looking at this over the long term, you can see that we're going to have substantially fewer kids in the district. And again, that means that we're going to have fewer resources coming in. So one of the reasons that I spoke with the elementary teachers today is that the elementary is the first to see this affect them. And again, looking at that 13-14 school year, we had around 2,400 elementary students, and in 21-22, that's going to be 1,850. Again, that is a projection. Things can always change, but it is the data that we currently have. So when we look at our buildings next year, projected for the 18-19 school year, you're going to see several elementary buildings that are going to be in the 200 range for that building, with Mulberry being would be the smallest building at 222, Colorado at 234, and Madison at 226. McKinley would be our largest. That would be 3 sections straight across the board in all grade levels at McKinley. And you can also see, if you look down at the bottom of that graph, that the sophomore class is the only class in that array that is above 400. And as you look down kindergarten and first grade, it's right around that 300 mark. When I came 5 years ago in planning, we always kind of used 400 as the benchmark, and it looks like we're going to have to start ratcheting that down a little bit. So one of the, and this is the conversation we've had with the elementary principals, we will have in some of these buildings, and these numbers that you see on this chart, that is probably the optimal number. It is. I don't want to say the maximum, but if everything would fall into order, would be those numbers. So you can see when you look at Colorado, you'd have 2 sections of kindergarten with 15. Mulberry, 2 sections with 13 kids. So there's those. Those are those difficult ones, because when you have 30, that's too many for one, not really enough for 2. And so we've had some conversations, and we'll go through those here in a little bit, some things that we might do in the short term to address that. So I said, there's a range. That 315 that you saw in that previous graph, that was the potential number if everybody shows up and things would all fall into line. We also have another projection where we've taken the factors that have traditionally been the average when we're looking at the number of students that may be in kindergarten, that may go to Mary Mathias, maybe homeschool, maybe open enroll, that type of thing. Well, you see that number then drops down to 284 if we would have that similar pathway that we've had over the last few years. So, whenever you talk about declining enrollment, it's always a little bit depressing. And that's one of the things that I wanted to impress upon our elementary staff today. It doesn't need to be. It is a reality. But the fact is, declining enrollment does not mean declining quality. We do a lot of good things in this district. We've had, the last few years, we've had declining enrollment. We have, as you heard the mock trial folks get up and do their presentation, we have a lot of good things going on, and there's no reason for that to happen, to change. What we do need to have, though, is to make sure that we have a plan that we can continue to have those programs. So I want to remind folks that even though we have been in this period of declining enrollment and we have had to cut our budget, we have done so again so that we're in front of the curve, and we still are able to have significant accomplishments. Our students are performing better than they have for many years. We offer a large number of programs, activities, 150 activities, K-12. We have not cut back on one of those. We have added a number of different course offerings. We've added academies for our kids. We maintain class sizes. Oftentimes when you see people that get into declining enrollment, if they wait too long, then they're forced to have, you've got 32 or 33 in a kindergarten class. This board has been very proactive to make sure that we haven't had to be in that situation. We've had capital projects. We're investing in additional security in this district. We have put in a ton of new furniture in our buildings. We have painted. We've upgraded. We have everything from replacing lights and resurfacing playgrounds to new playgrounds. We've built a brand new elementary school. We have a new phys ed facility going up at the high school. We're talking about our new STEM facility at the high school. We're going to be working on a stadium. We have updates that need to go to McKinley. We redid our auditorium. We can go on and on with these things. It's just important to remember we are a progressive and moving forward district. Even though our numbers are not increasing, our quality of our program has not suffered. We've added additional curriculum. We've added the pre-AP. We've purchased additional language arts curriculum. We're working on science curriculum, social studies curriculum. We're planning for decline. It is a district with declining enrollment, and those are two very different things. We have added staff over the last few years. We've added significant mental health supports. We've added gifted and talented support, at-risk supports. We've done things with in attendance. We've increased the time for our building secretaries, which are so important, the important function they do in our districts. Again, we are continuing to meet the needs of our folks. So, with all that said, there are some things that I think as we look at this enrollment picture, that I think there's some things that we have to make sure we remember and keep true to as we're making decisions. The only way we're going to have a quality program is that we have to retain quality staff. If we lose quality staff, the wheels get wobbly fast. We have to make sure that our staff understands we're going to have a plan to maintain our stability, that we're going to have a plan to maintain program improvements, and we need to make sure that our families and those people considering moving to Muscatine recognize that this is going to be a place that's going to be a school of quality. We have to make sure, though, that we connect fixed costs to our revenues. With declining enrollment, there is no pathway to sustain the status quo. And if you aren't nimble, if you don't change, if you don't adapt, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep the program as it is. And that is one of the things that sometimes is most difficult, is that, yes, it's maybe have to look different. We may have to do some things differently. That doesn't mean that it's bad. Doesn't mean that it's a letdown. It just means that in order to make sure that we can afford the things that are most important, that we do those things. And this capacity to be able to adapt ahead of crisis is critical. So as we looked at these things, there's, like I said, some short-term, mid-term, and long-term things that need to be discussed. First, we looked at short-term, next 6 months. We've got some elementary buildings that are going to have fewer kids. And so we have to figure out how we're going to approach that. And we talked about, and the principals put on their thinking caps, and the lights went on and everything else. And we talked about, well, we could look at multi-age classrooms. And I've been in districts where they've been very successful. And that's certainly an option. We looked at a model where, again, 30 kids is too many for one section, maybe too little for two, but you use a teacher and a half, and do some things particularly in the younger grades in the literacy work, that you are making the group smaller. We have talked about incentivizing folks to the buildings that have the lowest enrollment. If we could come up with an incentive to have folks from other buildings take a look at that. And one of the things that we spent quite a bit of time talking about was, if we were to offer wraparound care for parents, would that be something that would attract some people to say, we would transfer our kids from a building to another building that would have these lower needs. We know that wraparound care is something that parents are interested in. This would be entirely one of those we would look at using as an incentive to help with these numbers. When we look a little bit farther in that 12 to 18 month range, one of the things that really the linchpin of the conversation is Central Middle School still a viable educational facility? And if it isn't, then we have to look at options, one of which would be that we look at having one 7-8 building, that we have our 6th graders stay at the elementary buildings. And I think a strong case can be made that would be good, not only from socializing standpoint, but I think you could make an argument that it would be good academically for those kids to stay at the elementaries. And in order to make room for that, again, this question of, do you have a centralized early childhood center to make room so that those 6th graders can be there? Now, those are all questions that have to be answered in order to make some decisions about that. And as I told the teachers today, we could do nothing next year, and because of all the work Tom has done, we could get by a year. We could maybe get by 2 years, and then all of a sudden, we've spent reserve, and we're in a hole, and we have to do something more drastic, and we don't have some of the options that maybe we'd like to have. So I think it's going to be imperative that we take a look at what is it over the next 12 to 18 months do we need to do to best protect the district. And then the long term, over the next 10 years, as we take a look at this enrollment pattern and see where that plateaus, and with these aging buildings, the district's going to have to decide which buildings to replace, how do we replace them, where do we replace them, what do they look like when we do replace them. But again, those conversations need to be in a time when you're not under the hammer that we have to do something. And if you have time, if you have years to plan for that, I think this district can really place itself well going into the decade after that 10 years. But it is going to take some careful planning and stewardship over the next decade to get to that long-range solution. So, one of I guess what I wanted to leave the board with our other members of our district, we have some challenges, but we have some great opportunities. We have some opportunities to do things differently and maybe improve our programs. We have time to do this. We have the capacity to handle this challenge, but we have got to be in front of it. So with having said that, any questions from the board, or any questions the board may have the principals? I appreciate them coming tonight and being in Murderer's Row there. I thought maybe that the trial judge folks were going to, ask for a verdict or something from you folks. But any questions or thoughts from the board?
What's the likelihood in your mind of us having to borrow money at any point in the next 10 years?
Oh, man. I think, here's how I'd answer that. I understand this district does not like the thought of debt. And in many ways, there are some things that make this district a little more fragile. So if we can avoid that, I think that's doable, but it would really require some careful planning moving forward, so that 10 years from now, 12 years from now, when those buildings are 75 years old, that you can make a decision about we need maybe this community only needs maybe 3 elementaries, larger elementaries, and you go forward and take a look at what you need and move forward with that. So, I just don't have a crystal ball on that one, Nathan. There's so many things that could intercede with that. I think the quicker there's some sort of plan moving forward, what the district wants for the long term, the amount that you may have to borrow, if any, becomes impacted.
Well, Jerry, first of all, for me as an educator, I think the place is not what's the most important thing. I think if we are maintaining the quality of education and even improving that quality, the place becomes really not the primary reason or factor. It becomes a secondary. So I can see how all these pieces are connected together. And as a board, what we need to do also to look at this comprehensive plan and make some decisions. But as I'm looking at the numbers also here, and all the great stuff that we're hearing that are coming from whether elementary school, middle school, or high school, I would like to say thank you to all the principals for doing a great job working with what's available for you. And I think, we definitely need to have a serious discussion about, what we need to do, what will be the next step, keeping in mind that the quality of education needs to stay at it is right now, if it's not even much better in the future. So I think for me, the quality comes first. So.
I know we've talked about this before, but for those watching, these are pretty good numbers, accomplishments, where we stand. How are we using this in conjunction with our corporate partners as far as recruiting goes? for them to have this information to take to the people they're looking to hire? What's that look like in the next, I don't know, I say 6 months, 3 to 4 years?
You know, that's, we probably don't do enough of that. The Progress Breakfast is probably the big unveiling of where we're at each year. We have done some promotional work. We put together a brochure and that type of thing. We've gotten out to realtors. We've gotten out to folks. We need more work in that area, and we probably need at some point to have a conversation about, do we have the right people, enough people to do that marketing? Because that's really what you're talking about, is marketing. And without that, you know, you can have the greatest, we may be the best kept secret.
Sure.
But that doesn't bring people in if it's a secret. And so that is something that we constantly talk about. We're trying to figure out some models that maybe would help us with that. But that, as you know from the business side of things, marketing just doesn't happen. It requires resources to do that.
Jerry, as you know, the Mississippi Bend AEA has been running budget deficits and has been ordered by the state to present new budget and a plan to get out of the deficits that they're generating. Is there any concern that that situation is going to affect the services that we provide? Are we going to need to pick up any slack, or is that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. You know, we're fortunate that we're of a size, we do get special education assistance, but we probably are not as dependent upon some EEA services as smaller districts.
Okay. But like your Durants or your other schools might be
I think, you know, because they just don't have the personnel or resources, they depend on an area agency probably a little bit more than we do for some of those things.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
I have a question that kind of goes along with what Toby was asking. And I think we got an email from some individuals in the community about the Early Childhood Center. And I'm wondering, this document definitely would help if this was put on our website, or if the newspaper made it available to say, you know, this is the why, and so this is how we're going to try and address it, which we haven't gotten to yet. But if that could be done.
Oh, I agree, and I certainly will share this message anywhere I'm invited, or maybe not invited. And again, I think it's important that it's a two-sided message. We have challenges, but we are not in decline. That is just really critical for our community, for our people out there, that you know that the sign for Chinese sign for crisis is both danger and opportunity, and that's how I see this. We have a great opportunity to do some really good things for this district long term.
Well, I think the concept of neighborhood schools is changing now, and that was part of a question that we had as board members. Why are we going away from that? Well, if you don't have the enrollment, you have to look at things differently. So.
Well, and principals probably can answer this better than I can, but you know, when these buildings were built, my guess is most of the kids walked to the school. And my guess is not that many kids walk to school anymore. Not that that's, you know, we all would like to have, you know, a school within, you know, 6 blocks of our house. We may not be able to be able to provide the kinds of services that we have and have that same model. Mm-hmm. Are there any thoughts on on incentivizing, trying to incentivize enrollment?
Well, when you look at these numbers, you know, for example, Colorado goes from a high of 23 to a low of 15. So there's no silver bullet that you can use to balance out the enrollment. So I kind of like that idea of being able to draw some students from one location to the other to help balance, because there's just, you know, you can't just start drawing lines in the district to create a balanced look.
Well, and we spent quite a bit of time talking about, you know, well, you could redistrict, and I said, and I think that would work great for the next superintendent. No, we know that always causes a lot of turmoil. If you could get folks to make a choice with a service that really helps them, you don't have some of that animosity that comes with redistricting. And probably down the road, I'm not, let's be honest, there probably will have to be some redistricting if we look at a different model 10 years down the road. But hopefully by then, everyone is really clear on the case.
Right. But the wraparound care would be a good way to help that.
Well, and I'm going to kind of open that up to the principals, but I think it has possibilities.
Is there any concern about if you incent a family to go somewhere, the existing families that are there wanting a part of that as well? Well, no, but just in general, like if a family goes and you say, yes, I will go here because you have this wraparound service. Well, what if I'm a family in this school?
In that, if you're in that, and we're thinking probably, we'd probably be looking K2.
Okay.
Because we have to have some limits, and really where do we want the incentivize is K1 and 2.
Okay.
So it would be available for that building.
Okay.
And only if we had enough folks come in to change those numbers. Because you don't have to have that many in either Colorado or Mulberry. That would really make that more viable. And take care of that. And that is not a long-term solution, but it is a solution, for next school year. And as we look down the road with, if sixth graders stay in the buildings, well, that changes the dynamic of the building. Because I think with our elementary buildings, we would be really taking a wrong step if we looked at closing more right now before we had a sense of where the plateau is on enrollment. And I'm also going to say this, we have been able to maintain the programs we have. Part of the reason we've been able to maintain the programs we have is because we are not operating Garfield or Washington. And, that's, but I think at this point to maintain those until we get a handle on what would be that long-range plan for our buildings would make sense.
Well, and I look back to that facility study we conducted a while back that found that a town of our size would generally have, about 6 elementary schools. And the fact is we've got I don't know if they would have that many anymore. Even fewer, wow. So, we've got 8 schools that were built in an 8-year period between 50 and 60 years ago. Whatever we do, we're looking at building schools in a short order. Either that or some really substantial renovations, which I think we found out with Jefferson are probably just as much as building a new school in some cases. So, we've got to do something. I commend you guys for looking in creative ways of dealing with this issue. And as for incenting folks to go to schools that have a lower population, I would say that's an incentive of itself. I think we need to make it clear, like if you're looking for a lower class size, head to one of the schools that has fewer students. And I don't know how aware the general public is of the possibility. It's probably something they just don't think of. So I live in the Mulberry district, I live in the Grant district. You probably don't think about, well, I really do have an opportunity to move my kids around. So the more we can do to just make it clear to folks that that's a real option, I think we'll catch some folks there.
Would there be any, does the board have any concerns if we would do a preliminary just outreach to parents, see how much interest there would be if we did some sort of wraparound?
I think it'd be a good idea to get a feel for it, just to get us an idea, because those decisions need to be made by parents fairly quickly.
Yeah, really, really probably in the next 60 days or so would be good,
Because they're going to want to, if their child care is something they got to adjust, or there may be a bunch of them out there right now that are going, you know, this is going to make things easier for us as a family.
We've had parents say, you know, this would be a real help for them, and you know, and I think it'd be good for kids in that now there's always a struggle for some families to get their kid from a daycare to school, or from home to school and then picked up at, you know, school time. If there could be kind of one stop, fewer transitions for the student, and what we would be looking at is, you know, before school care would be breakfast and, you know, some supervised time. After school would be snacks, probably some supervised play, those kind of things. It's not going to be, you know, obviously it's going to be more daycare than preschool, but they've been in school all day. It's just, again, it's just one of those things that we're trying to find some ways of doing this to take care of this short-term problem, and then, you know, give us a little bit longer time to see how we need to adjust things.
I also heard we're not looking for 50 or 100 kids. We're just looking for.
If you had 20,
10
if we had 20 more kids at Mulberry and probably another 20 at Colorado, probably be in the ballpark.
Right. So
you know,
it's not. You don't have to go out and gather.
We don't have to have a home run.
That's right.
A bunt single would be great.
Exactly. Exactly.
Jerry, can you touch just a little bit on the piece of Central? It's never an easy conversation in talking about what the lifespan of a building will be, and I know there's been lots of conversation in the community, but a little bit about the cost of what we would need for repairs and the extent, and then we have as a board have also talked about, we know that the auditorium space there it's important to the community, it's important to the district, and that we are thinking about that as well.
Yeah, we absolutely are, and I've had some informal conversations with some people that feel like they could maybe save the auditorium and the gym, and would be willing to do that. So I think there is a solution maybe for that, because the renovating Central. You know, Tyler kind of threw out the 12-14 million, but at the end of the day, you still have that building in those rooms. I mean, it's not going to get bigger.
And say that number again.
12 to 14 million is, and I'm, Mike, I'm making sure I'm not lying on this. Is that?
Yeah, that's accurate, Jerry.
Which is more than the cost of a building, of building new.
And the biggest problem we have with Central, Nathan, you close your ears, is not the money. The biggest problem we have with Central renovation is time. You have 2 months. And it's really would be hard to do a major renovation in 2 months, because we would need that building for school. You know, I think if we can pursue how can we maybe save the best of Central, and I agree that the theater is a community issue. It's more than just a school issue. I think that would be worth pursuing. You know, and the other thing we've done some preliminary look at, could West hold all the 7th and 8th graders? There's 750 lockers, I think, so it'd be pretty close. It would be different. Now, as you look at the numbers over time, that pressure on West gets less, but probably in the first year or two, you know, every classroom would probably get used, and there wouldn't be open classrooms.
It's no spring chicken either.
It's not, but it's led a pretty healthy lifestyle. You know, so, and again, that it is, when you look at these buildings, they all have some age on them, and but you know the elementaries were built small. The gyms are too small, other than Madison and Jefferson. McKinley gym doesn't fit their whole student body. I know for a long time the kids ate in their classrooms at McKinley. I think Joelle is. Yeah. So McKinley, you know, needs additional space, but the other ones are, that are showing their age. And you still have, even if you do some remodeling, the bones of the building is still 50, 60, 70 years old. And so that is one of those things that the board will have to take into account with these. And I wish that I had an easy answer for you. And I wish I could say, here's all you have to do. But there's not really an easy answer. But there are a series of doable steps that you can do that will make them easier to accomplish. But we have to first make a decision about, is Central viable? Do we want sixth graders back? If we do, we need to make room for them. Where do we put the preschools? So,
Well, I like the idea of some short-term investigation right now, because we could do something this fall.
Right.
Which is a significant opportunity for us. And then it's the dominoes. They've all got to happen in a sequence, getting that plan in place. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other thing that we have to start doing is taking a look long-term. How much money can the district salt away over the next decade? Principals, any pearls of wisdom, we'll take them. I just want to brag on our principals here a little bit.
Like nothing.
These people are really great to work with, and they just really care a whole lot about our kids, about our staff, and I just appreciate all they do. And if you haven't been in elementary school lately, the tasks have not gotten easier, but there are certainly, these folks are certainly working hard to do the very best for our kids and our community. I just really appreciate you guys. Thank you. So, okay, so any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I've taken a lot of time, but this is important, really important stuff for the district.
What are we waiting to hear back on from about the JCPenney possibility?
We are waiting to hear where they would be at with supporting the venture. They're doing some work on that.
They being the mall?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. And what we're hoping for, and I think we'll have for the April work session, I think we'll be able to have some information to take a look at with that.
I have a quick question for our principals while they're here.
Good.
What are your thoughts on putting sixth graders back in your buildings? They're smiling. That's good.
Heads are doing a little bobbing, but there's no.
I think from a personal perspective, I remember my own daughter being a sixth grader a couple years ago, and how, she was successful in middle school, but she wasn't ready for middle school quite yet. So I think from that perspective, I personally think it would be a good move. I would be ready at Madison to have them stay.
And I'd like to, as we talked to the principal group about the opportunities that would allow you to reimagine what fifth and sixth grade would look like and the opportunities that would perhaps be available to them in an exploratory or STEM type things and a little bit cross-disciplinary work, even from a fine arts perspective, being able to have the fifth and sixth grades practicing and developing some of those choir type activities. So I think there's opportunities, and again, from every type of adversity, you have opportunities moving forward. And I think what Dr. Reedy has done a nice job of is looking at maybe some difficulties and adversity and looking at how we can continue as a district to create opportunities for kids.
These are positive ways to impact programs, and everybody who's involved. I like taking that positive and being proactive as opposed to getting behind the ball and then trying to make them. I think there's some pieces in there that we can do to look positive, from a positive point of view.
What concerns do you have then? And we can be, and I appreciate the positive, and I agree with you, because change is hard. Follow through on that change is harder. What concerns, of any, if any, are there?
Attitudes of sixth graders are different.
That's fair. That's fair.
I think our middle-level educators have done a phenomenal job of providing some great opportunities for our sixth grade. And so I want to make sure that we were focusing on the right conversation as we make that transition for those students. make that transition with, so I would be excited about moving forward with that.
It adds another dimension to your building too, to have sixth graders, in that they really can be really dynamic leaders. I think there are some, it's, everybody's for change. It's the changing that hurts. And so, there will be some growing pains with those kinds of things. But again, we just have to have a long game in this one, and we will. So, okay, well, I will sit down then.
Thank you very much, and principals, thank you for your thoughts and your comments tonight, because it does help us a lot. Next on our agenda are possible action items. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. That includes minutes, employment recommendations, and bills and claims. What are the wishes of the board?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. The next item on our agenda is to approve the Bone Sack and Furmalt audit service. And Tom, I believe you have this as a action item for us on our agenda.
Correct. So, sent out another RFP, and you saw the response there. They, a firm we've used in the past declined to give an RFP response back. I did not inquire to find out why. I don't know if it's a timing. Obviously, this is for FY18 audit, so for another firm to suddenly schedule a new client in their audit schedule might have been difficult. I didn't inquire about that. There were, in the past, as you see on the history here, we've sent out 10 RFPs to different auditors. We've received back 2 responses in each of the last 2 years, that being Bone Sack and Frommelt and Nolte Corman. So the recommendation is to keep Bone Sack and Frommelt for 3 years, or we can approve just a 1-year agreement with them. I don't believe their RFP that came back was unreasonable in price compared to what we've been paying. They're willing to do it for 1 year, and then we would just do another, we'll send out another RFP in the fall, so.
I kind of the one that kind of pushed this a little bit, and after the meeting, I thought, well, they're not going to quote. Yeah. It was kind of the first thought, because they already knew what the answer was from the one, so it was kind of a.
If they knew, I don't know if they knew we had already sent out RFPs. There was no indication in the RFP that I sent out that this is like a second go around at all, so.
And Tom, you also sought feedback from the audit committee as well.
That's correct, yeah. And the audit committee is in favor of either recommendation. I think one of them felt that because of the size of our audit and the firm, I mean, just not every firm can do a public school district audit with our federal guidelines and everything, that, that's why it's so hard to get RFP responses. So.
Well, with this kind of thing, I think that consistency is a very good thing, especially as the
continuity
auditor,
is important.
Yeah, the auditor gains institutional knowledge. So I would move approval of the 3-year option.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the Bone Sack and Frommalt services for a 3-year term. Is there any other discussion?
Yeah, I agree with Nathan's point. I mean, when you deal with numbers like that, when you give them 3 years, they get more familiar with that. Next year will be much better than this year, and so on. So I go for that too. Yeah.
How many years have they done that now? This will be.
They've finished their 3rd year with us.
Okay, so they've already had the 3 years.
Yes.
Well, it's expensive. When you're on the other side and you're answering or responding to the RFP, there's a cost to do that, and And I can also understand, again, if you're in the arena of it's a select few, you don't always want to make that investment either to do that RFP. So I think all of those comments make sense.
I'd just like to make sure next time we do the quote.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you.
Tom, you're getting all the spotlight tonight. The next thing we need to do is certify our budget for the 2018-2019 year.
Okay. So in front of your board, in front of the board is a packet I gave you, a short summary of, I think it was at the end of February we first met and talked about the budget and the proposed property tax rate. And then in March, the first Monday in March, we approved the public hearing, approved, at that time we didn't know SSA, state supplemental aid. I think the next day or the next day after that, it was approved at 1%, went ahead and published at 0% still, so we're fine with the recommendation because the rate is lower and the property tax is lower with 1% SSA. So in the packet, I'll just go ahead and skip page 1. It's the summary of an enrollment. We earlier tonight got that enrollment projection, but this is just a one-page summary of like 3 or 4 pages from last February work session about certified enrollment, enrollment served, etc. So page 2 of that document then is again the same document you saw with the history of property tax rates. So please look at page 3. Page 3 is that revised proposed levy rate for 18-19, the 14.79106. That is this is all based on 1% supplemental state aid. It's based on, I guess, updated figures in our aid and levy after the legislature approved the SSA approved or revised figures for our instructional support income surtax because that rate or the amount for calendar year 2016 was finalized, so we are building that into the aid and levy also. So still seeing a reduction of 12 cents, and clearly the reduction has to do with our cash reserve levy. We're at our statutory limit for levying for cash reserve. We don't want to levy for any more. We have our solvency ratio is very healthy. So obviously that makes sense. Doesn't mean 2-3 years down the road we won't be implementing or attempting to implement that again depending on our cash situation. So, and then nothing else has really changed in the management or capital projects levies. Those are the same as they were presented the last time. So page 4 is, it had at the top, it had that history of SSA. I had 0 and 1%. I just changed this document to reflect the 1%. I did do some digging in the last couple years of our package settlements with teachers. I got to go back farther yet. I should be able to find those, I believe. So page 5 is same as what I showed you before, a 5-year forecast, 5-year history of our property valuations. And I think the one important document is page 6 that we use for general fund purposes. This is our unspent authorized budget. So the first teal colored column, FY19, has our 1% SSA built in, and again, estimates of SBRC amounts for overspending our LEP, for increased in enrollment, open enrollment out. So we use those estimates based on the current year and estimating our miscellaneous income. And then, you know, if our expenditures raise 2%, what is that amount that we need to reduce in order to keep our ratios in line with our unspent authorized budget? And so obviously it's just an estimate at this point. We're still several months away from FY19, but this is what we go by. This document is very important in our general fund. And then I'll point you back to the board book. There were 2 items in there. There was the 0% SSA that was published, and then the next page I showed you the 1%, and this is what we're recommending approving. And then there was a 2-page document. This is simply our worksheets that we use to generate our budget for the year. And this is where it goes fund by fund. Obviously, the activity management, PEPL, those are pretty, you know, they have to cash flow. They're pretty simple, if you will, I guess, to figure. It's that general fund, the first column, that we really look at. And then the last page is what our adoption of budget and taxes that we're approving tonight. So the recommendation is to approve our levy rate of 14.79105 with an $86,202,797 budget for next year. And again, that's the RO budget across all funds. So,
What are the wishes of the board, or what questions do you have for Tom on that budget information?
So we are currently at 12 point, you said?
I'm sorry, what?
No, the levy rate.
What our current levy rate is?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is for 18-19, 14.7, but
For 17-18, it's at 14.91989.
okay.
Decrease.
Yep.
Decrease, okay.
Yep.
Well, I move to certify the budget for 2018-2019 school year with the approved, with levy rate of 14.79105 and certified budget of 86,202,797.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to present the 2018-19 budget as Tom has presented. That's a total of $86,202,797. Is there any discussion on that?
Thanks for all your work.
Thank you.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. Tom, thank you. That doesn't just, I'm sure that's more than 5 or 10 minutes of work.
A little bit.
Plugging some numbers in on the
15,
spreadsheet.
20 minutes.
and,
It's
yeah.
easy.
I took a week off.
Yeah.
There's a Mac.
Tammy,
Poor guy.
who seconded? got caught up in the numbers.
Tim.
I seconded.
Tim seconded that. Next on the agenda is approving our 2018-19 general student fee structure. And if you're following along in your board book, it's the next page. I'm going to look to Tom or Jerry. Do either one of you have any commentary you would like to add to that?
They are as they have been.
Yep.
And,
I think there's a small increase in the transportation rate that we charge outside district, or for outside uses.
I'd say I saw
outside
lots of
school.
no change for, that parents would not, could expect to see nothing, no increases in student fees for next year.
Correct.
Okay.
Somewhere the ghost of Tom Johans is smiling.
I'll second
We should
the,
videotape this for him.
yes.
Right.
I'll give him a call tomorrow.
All right, now I
Okay.
missed who made the motion.
I'm making the
You're
motion.
making the motion,
I'm
all
sorry.
right.
I'll second it.
All right, sorry. The board
Tom-
digresses
was trying to give
slightly
it to
for
Tom.
some giving a nod to a past board member. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the fee structure for 2018-19. And just to summarize, no increase in student fees for parents next year. What Tom did mention is that there was a slight increase should buses be used for non-school related groups. So parents will not, again, we won't see a change to your fees for next year. So any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. The next item we have on our agenda is to approve the high school athletic sharing agreements, which is outlined in your board document. And this particular agreement lists the outlying school districts that we would be including in some of these specific activities. Jerry, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, these are all, would be renewals of agreements that we've had for years, with the exception of the high schools requesting a new sharing agreement with Wise and Muscatine for girls and boys cross country. This is really kind of one of those good neighbor kinds of things. There's usually 2 or 3 kids per activity that may be involved. I think we had a couple of, I think we had maybe 3 bowlers. I think bowling maybe had the biggest participation. That's the like I said, the bowling, soccer, tennis, and swimming are all renewals of longstanding agreements, and then the high school is requesting the additional one for cross country.
What are the wishes of the board?
Is there sharing? There's no financial sharing. It's just a resource where, like you said, it's a good neighbor type thing.
It is, and sometimes with some of these activities, it helps flesh out a team. And then, but it's primarily a kind of a good neighbor kind of thing. But there is, the other, and it's the cooperating school, it's their responsibility to get the student to practices, to, get to our building, to be transported for games, that type of things. We don't take on any additional expenses, but they don't share any other costs.
What are the wishes of the board?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the high school athletic sharing agreements as requested. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? And the motion carries. That takes us to our discussion and information portion of our agenda. The first item under discussion information is the second reading on the 401.5 family and medical leave policy. So this is, as it states, our second reading. So this is the second time that we have seen this particular policy. We'll see it one more time for a third reading prior to approval. If you have any questions regarding that policy or any feedback, I'd ask if you would get those to Lisa so that she can send those out to the board. That would be great. And Lisa, have you had any feedback on that? Okay. All right. The next item is our superintendent evaluation, and I think Jerry is going to give us some directions on the evaluation tool.
Let's see, Lisa, if the board's been.
I have not sent it out yet.
Okay.
I wanted to wait,
Okay.
but it's ready to go.
Okay, so it's the same form that's been used. I believe it's a Google Doc.
It is Google.
So the board has a couple of options. If you got it in, it could be discussed at the April work session, or it can be done in the May meeting also. So that I would leave entirely up to the board how they would like that to, what kind of timeline they'd like to look with that. But it really shouldn't go past the May board meeting.
So each year, just to recap that a little bit, as every member or employee of a company appreciates feedback, we certainly owe that to Jerry, and that is an important responsibility that the board has. So the tool that Lisa will email out is our opportunity as a board to provide feedback to him. There are specific categories that are listed. The feedback goes back to Lisa. She will then pull all that information together for us. And then the board, traditionally in a closed setting, will then review that information with Jerry. Because it's a closed setting, there's no action that's taken, but it is a time for us to have a conversation with Jerry. But again, something we do every year, an important feedback that we owe him. So knowing that, I would also ask the board, just thinking about what your own timelines look like, how much time would you like to be able to provide some of that feedback? And I will state, the longer I tend to get, the more I procrastinate. So I will add that to the mix, if that makes a difference. It would take us to, I believe April 23rd is our next work session. So that would be 2 weeks from this evening.
You're gonna send it out like tomorrow?
Like 5 minutes.
Like
She's ready to hit send.
Already have type thing?
She's ready. Don't start working on it though until after the meeting.
Okay. I guess I'd like to get it done. Before you know it, we'll be into graduation and
Yeah.
all that type of thing, so.
I agree. I think it's something needs to be done, and if we can find time as soon as possible and go through the process, it will be better for all of us, including Jerry too. I mean, we owe it to him too.
Absolutely. So Lisa, if we actually put maybe April 19th as a target to have information back to you, does that give you enough time to compile information into a single format?
Yes.
So that would be I would say a hard deadline would be Thursday, April 19th at maybe 3 p.m.
I like that.
Does that work?
That works.
So April 19th, 3 p.m., if we can have that information sent back to Lisa, that would give her, that gives her a little bit of time to compile before the meeting. And I bet she'll send us a reminder maybe at the end of this week and maybe at the beginning of next week so that we don't forget to do that. Perfect. All right, next on our agenda is our February financials. Tom, we're back to you.
I can do this in 3 comments. That's all right.
Lots of cash.
So,
This took as long as the budget, is that it?
comment number 1, February financials are being presented, treasurer's report.
That's one.
Okay, comment number 2, this is, we're about halfway through paying contracts for teachers, so it's a very good tool that we use to see where we are at in our overall budget. So we should be around 50% of our expenses or a little bit more, and that's right where we're at. So I think we're on track. And comment number 3 is regarding the activity fund report. Reminder that every month on the 15th, activity fund sponsors and advisors are emailed a current up-to-date activity fund report from our finance system, and if they don't get it, they contact Wendy or they contact Nicole. So it is a little bit longer report because I'm trying to just like run the report, make some comments, and put it in the board book rather than kind of cutting and pasting and putting things together and such. So that's why it's the length, and that's my 3rd comment. So that's it.
Mine was more brief.
Well,
What questions do you have on February financials for Tom? It's like he spent all his time on the 18-19 budget or whatever.
I think, Tom, what you did on the activity, that's fine. You don't need to spend
Super
a lot of
great.
time doing that. What you put the comments and so forth was,
Yep, we're on top
my
of that.
opinion, was good, so.
Thank you.
And whatever the activity folks, whatever each group receives is enough for them to know on the 15th where they're at,
Correct.
right? They're
They should
spending
be.
appropriately? Okay,
Yes.
good. Good. Anything else? Well, that takes us to just a few announcements before we adjourn for the evening. April 12th, which I believe is this Thursday, is Kindergarten Roundup. That will be from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., and that will be at the Administration Center, which is 2900 Mulberry. So if you have a kindergartner coming up, we hope that we hope to see you there, and bring all your kindergartner friends, because we would like to have more of them.
If you see any loose, grab them too.
That's right. That's right. And then
start recruiting.
Friday, April 13th is a Teacher in Service Day, and our students don't have to be at school that day. April 23rd is Monday evening, which will be the board work session. That's at 6 p.m., and we will be at Madison that evening. And just to back up, by Thursday, April 19th at 3 p.m., you'll all have your information to Lisa, and those of you that are overachievers will have it to her before. Maybe there's a prize for that or something. And then on May 14th, as we head into a very busy season and an exciting time for our seniors, May 14th will be our regular board session. We'll be back here at City Hall, and that will be at 7 p.m. Are there any other announcements that the board would like to share before we adjourn? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Or we could all hang out for a while. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Lisa?
Nothing wrong with that.
I know, right?
I should have put money on that.
Always wanted to be